Dr. Aureliano, no medical ideal on earth is worth such a descent into ruin.
Aureliano rode onward, the shouted question echoing behind him, a question he had no answer for. The fires of war between clinical and scientific factions had already engulfed the whole of Colombia. No soul could remain untouched, no heart indifferent. And this man called the Colonel of the Ward, rode forth once more to his 33rd qui pay, ever chasing the elusive truth of medicine.
I was born in Macondo, a little town where nobody remembers a damn thing about the past. Our history died long ago, swallowed by a plague of insomnia and amnesia. One day, everyone in town stopped sleeping, and on that very same day, we started forgetting. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing until, just as suddenly, we all woke up again, realizing only one thing: our memories were fucked. So my father, Jose, declared, if we don't get ourselves some medicine soon, we're screwed. And that's how we came to build the Macondo People's Hospital right in the middle of nowhere. Back then, we barely had enough people to keep things running. Doctors had no ranks, just specialties. Whoever could fix something, fixed it. The hospital was dirt poor and forgotten by the government, so the best we could do for anyone who did a decent job was to give them honorary titles like Knight of the Ureter, Hunter of Blood Clots, and Ranger of the Sinuses. But one day, the gypsies arrived, and their leader, Melchiades, handed my father a strange parchment scroll. They called it God's medical record. It was said that every disease on earth, along with its treatment and cure, had already been written inside it. Whoever deciphered that scroll could cure every illness known to man. From that moment on, my father was spellbound. Day and night, obsessed with decoding the parchment, he never practiced medicine normally again. Then came the day when the Colombian government sent emissaries who called themselves the Scientific Party. With great pomp, they declared that our humble Macondo People's Hospital was now officially affiliated with the Colombian Academy of Medicine. They carried with them an imperial decree naming my father, old Jose, as the director of the hospital. My father protested sharply, declaring he had always been the director. The Scientific Party's leader calmly replied, "No, Jose, yours is merely an honorary title." And with deliberate ceremony, he placed upon the wooden table a hat embroidered with the words, "Scholar of the Amazon," proclaiming solemnly, only he who possesses this hat shall truly be called director. From that moment onward, Macondo's air grew thick with the scent of grant proposals and scholarly papers. Forgotten forever were the sacred admonitions of our forefathers, the 10 must-nots, the 2 must-nevers, and the 5 absolutes. The Scientific Party unleashed upon our town words, never before heard by human ears. They whispered seductively, mastering medicine pales before mastering alchemy. Simply write these words upon paper, and the government shall fill your courtyard with gold. Nanomaterials, exosomes, immune microenvironments, pyroptosis. Each incantation brought tears of ecstasy to the eyes of Scientific Party doctors. Yet each man must seek the truth of medicine in his own way. My father Jose, now stripped of power, remained lost in the mysteries of God's medical record. Day after day he searched feverishly within that parchment for a glimpse of the divine until madness overtook him. In the end, we had no choice but to tie him beneath a tree as he howled into the eternal night. Then came my own story. I was a surgical resident without allegiance to any faction, clinical or scientific. But an event soon unfolded that forced my hand against them. My peer Rebecca was training in internal medicine. The meager resident stipend left her no choice but to eat dirt for survival. Moved by her plight, our Buendía family took pity and adopted her into our home. The Scientific Party, however, saw in her condition an opportunity, quickly publishing a case report detailing the nutritional virtues of dirt upon human health. As for my brother Arcadio, fortune smiled brightest upon him. In his youth, he traveled widely with the gypsies, mastering the alchemy of research. Upon returning to Macondo, he relentlessly pursued funding grants until he was swiftly promoted to associate chief physician. Under the constant propaganda of the Scientific Party, who proclaimed across Macondo, Science is the finest cosmetic for a man's appeal. Rebecca was inevitably captivated by Arcadio's newfound sexiness. She married him without hesitation, forever escaping the humiliation of her dirt-eating days. But Arcadio's fortune was fleeting. One night, deep in an experiment that stretched till dawn, he succumbed to unbearable fatigue and recklessly decided to rest briefly in the pediatric ward. He never awoke. A patient's family member burst in and shot him dead on sight. In Macondo, family is sacred above all else, which is why the fruit stand opposite pediatrics sold shotguns loaded with motherly love, and the funeral goods shop facing geriatrics stocked boxing gloves labeled filial piety. That fateful night, Arcadio's electrophoresis buffer, as though bewitched, flowed steadily from the hospital and trickled into the Buendía family kitchen. Rebecca passionately insisted that Arcadio's true cause of death was exhaustion from endless research. The scientific party, mocking her claim as baseless and calling it witchcraft, threatened to burn her residency certificate at the stake upon a cross. After that betrayal, Rebecca broke entirely with hospital authorities and vowed her devotion to clinical practice, determined to rediscover the truth of medicine. If deciphering the scroll of God's medical record was impossible, she resolved to craft her own. Day after day, she painstakingly documented each patient's history, imagining the medical records department would treasure and study her writings. Until one afternoon, while eating dirt once again, she discovered yesterday's records buried in the earth beneath her feet, and with them, all her medical dreams turned to dust. Despite their countless differences, the scientific party and the clinical party both adhered firmly to one sacred doctrine, that there may be countless gods in this world, yet only one chief may reign in each ward. Both factions revered the Trinitarian principle of the department chief, that the chief, the son of the chief, and the spirit of the chief after death possess equal and absolute authority. As the flames of their conflict grew ever fiercer, I, a disciple of the clinical faith, had no choice but to leave Macondo upon completing my residency, setting forth across the country to repeat my residency 32 more times in search of the one true medicine. Gifted with the power to glimpse into the future, I survived 14 assassination attempts by patients and 73 ambushes by vengeful family members. Through these miraculous escapes, I earned the title of Colonel of the Ward, but my visions could never reach too far ahead. One day, troubled, I asked Rebecca, "Tell me, do you truly believe those rituals of the scientific party can cure diseases?" Rebecca simply replied that she disliked things beyond her control, which was precisely why she had set out to rewrite God's medical record with her own hand. My powers failed to reveal the future beyond that moment. Our conversation ended there, suspended in silence, drifting into uncertainty, and I felt, suddenly, a deep sorrow at the limits of my own foresight.
I am Arcadio Segundo, the younger brother of Aureliano Segundo. We were born as twins, so identical that even our parents struggled to tell us apart. As children, we took great delight in the game of switching identities. He would pretend to be me and help out at the hospital, while I would masquerade as him and collect prescriptions at the pharmacy. Not once were we caught, but now everything is different. I became an ordinary worker at a pharmaceutical factory, while my brother, Aureliano Segundo, struck a fortune beyond imagination. The story begins on the day I heard the news. Someone at the hospital claimed to have deciphered God's medical record and developed a miracle drug. But soon it was proven false. The man had merely stumbled upon a strange local plant. He named it big banana grass, and its juice possessed astonishing effects: pain relief, stimulation, the lifting of fatigue. Those who took it seemed to be reborn, radiant and full of life. The drug earned a nickname by Macondo Big Banana, and it swiftly became famous across the country. But because the process was complex and the plant rare, its price remained exorbitantly high. Aureliano Segundo and a woman named Petra had been running a ranch. Upon discovering the potential of big banana grass, they immediately transformed their land into a plantation for cultivating this medicinal plant. In doing so, they amassed a fortune that defied comprehension. Soon, word of this reached the company abroad. They registered themselves under a new name, the Banana Corporation. They too wanted a share of the miracle. Unable to seize the Macondo hospital directly, they smuggled out samples of big banana grass and attempted to grow it in other regions. But the plant seemed to recognize no home other than Macondo. Its potency faltered elsewhere, so they turned to chemical refinement, enhancing concentration to simulate the same effects. But with refinement came residue, addiction and toxins too subtle to detect. That didn't stop them from pushing the drug to market. What stood in their way was Colombia's regulatory system for generic drugs, known as the equivalence assessment. But even that posed no challenge. They stole the original Macondo formulation and submitted it for approval. Then they registered their new chemical additives as excipients, with little scrutiny at a distant regulatory office. With that, the Banana Corporation launched their version of the drug, Macondo, Banana Plus. They declared, "We came to Macondo to do just three things: fairness, fairness, and more fairness." With unbeatable prices, they rapidly conquered the market and fulfilled their promise of making medicine affordable to all. Macondo's original formulation, unwilling to lose at the starting line, changed its name to Macondo Banana Pro and was forced to slash its price. Later, the Banana Corporation reclaimed the name Macondo Big Banana. Some swore by the original, others by the imitation. But as the game of renaming and price cutting continued, no one could say for sure whether the Macondo Banana Pro Max or the Macondo Banana Ultra in their drawer was produced locally or abroad. With the arrival of the Banana Corporation, Macondo reached the height of its prosperity. Foreigners began to arrive. The town shimmered with vitality, but the pharmaceutical factory where I worked stood on the edge of collapse. Unable to compete with generics, we resorted to cost cutting, splitting a single dose into two. That meant all drugs on the market began causing long-term side effects. Using the name of the Buendía family, I gained access to the hospital archives and uncovered records of 3,000 patients who had died from adverse reactions. If I could publish this, it would be the end of this long-running farce. I hid the records, along with my factory ID, in the drawer of the Buendía family's secret room. But I did not anticipate that. Just as I was preparing to board the train to the capital, they would vanish overnight. I spoke to everyone I could find, accusing the drugs of causing harm, but no one believed me anymore.
One day, rain began to fall over Macondo, endless, unceasing. By then, the soil could no longer sustain big banana grass. Production of the original drug collapsed. The Banana Corporation withdrew from the market. Macondo, once noisy and full of strangers, returned to the quiet of a forgotten village until a murder broke the silence. 2 corpses were discovered in the secret room of the Buendía house. It was assumed that a quarrel had led the twin brothers to kill one another. One body carried both Aureliano Segundo's ID and Arcadio Segundo's factory badge. The other had nothing. No one could tell which was which. So, at the funeral, a drunken pallbearer casually placed the one with identification into Arcadio Segundo's grave and the other into Aureliano Segundo's. No one cared if they had been buried correctly, because long ago, the townspeople whispered that perhaps during one of their countless childhood games of switching names, the twins had already forgotten who they truly were and had, from that moment on, unknowingly exchanged their fates forever. The story reached its final chapter. The Buendía family, once thunderous in name, had faded into whispers. Its branches broken, its rooms empty, its name barely spoken. Fernanda, the last matriarch, took in a boy with no past, gave him a name heavy with history, Aureliano. And although she called him a bastard, she still sent him to medical school, saying it was time to restore the Buendía family's legacy as a house of medicine. She gave him duty, not affection, and told him to finish his studies, complete his residency, publish his papers, and never look outside the path that had been laid before him. The hospital was always full of patients, of pressure, of praise. But Aureliano felt nothing. Though others called his work noble and sacred, he could never feel that holiness for himself. He wasn't good at medicine, not for lack of trying, but because it simply meant nothing to him, and in a time when the scientific party ruled Macondo, Fernanda scolded him constantly for not publishing a single paper. He lived in the Buendía house, under its heavy roof of history, where he learned of a distant ancestor who bore his name, Colonel Aureliano, the so-called ward colonel who had rotated through hospitals 33 times in pursuit of the true nature of medicine and failed to lead the clinical party to victory. Fernanda never openly condemned the colonel, but her words and silences carried a warning. Don't become like him. And to her, he was a man who went mad chasing shadows, who sacrificed everything and achieved nothing. But Aureliano didn't see madness in the colonel. He saw a man who searched, who questioned, who was punished for caring too deeply. And the more Fernanda dismissed him, the more Aureliano felt a strange kinship, a private thread of solitude running through time. He began to wonder what the colonel thought about on his final rotation. Did he know his descendants would reduce his life to a cautionary tale, would forget him as a failure, would call him a freak? That curiosity became a pull, and one night, Aureliano stepped into the locked room of the Buendía house, where he found the legendary scroll, God's medical record, yet the writing on it made no sense, and before he could be caught, he slipped away. Later, he managed to publish his first case report and left it carefully on the dining table, hoping for Fernanda's praise. But 2 days passed, and no one picked it up. When he opened her bedroom door, he found she had already died. With Fernanda gone, the house became his, and the scroll, once forbidden, now lay open in his hands as he began the long work of decoding it, one sentence at a time. At first, it came slowly, like dust shaken from the bones of forgotten knowledge, but after just a few pages, his reputation began to grow. Suddenly, the hospital noticed him. Colleagues praised him, and for the first time, he felt visible. So he stopped decoding, believing perhaps the scroll had done its job. But then one day, he forgot the name of a drug, then the disease it treated, and then how the body even worked at all. It felt like something was peeling back his mind, tile by tile, like a roof stripped bare by wind. And in panic, he reopened the scroll and realized if he stopped decoding, everything he'd already learned would vanish. The more he read, the faster he forgot. And if he stayed away too long, he began to lose memories of his own life, who he was, where he came from, why he had started it all. And he knew there was no going back. So he read constantly, traded sleep for understanding, fed his mind with fragile lines of forgotten language, until even dreams became pages and waking hours became footnotes, and the scroll became not just a record, but a cage. People began to say Aureliano knew everything, that he had been chosen by fate, that he was the Messiah sent by the God, that he alone could finish what others had abandoned. And while the town called it sacred, he could only feel the cost. He remembered his first day of medical school, the raised fists, the oath spoken in unison, and thought that perhaps the first thing a doctor should learn is how to care for himself, because once you are seen as a healer, no one ever checks if you're bleeding. Then came a morning heavy with fog, and Aureliano walked through the quiet streets holding the final page of the scroll
only to find the hospital in chaos. People shouting, doors swinging, and a woman telling him a doctor had died in the lab, half devoured by ants. They found in his bag a badge marked Clinical Party, and Aureliano stood in front of the building, frozen, unable to speak, thinking only, if only I could forget. He wondered, as the colonel once did during his final days when he spent every hour forging tiny goldfish, whether it was better to be a creature with no memory at all. He opened the last page of the scroll. It was filled with every pain and every sorrow that ever passed through a human body. As he began to translate, the world around him flickered like the end of a film. Scenes returned, faces appeared, the past spiraled outward. Then came the wind, not a breeze, but a storm. The houses fell like brittle bones, the sky tore open, and all of Macondo, all of its names and ghosts and echoes, collapsed with him. The town fell silent again. Only the rain remained.